How would our world change if we could all use our hearts and minds to focus our loving intent on the unwell aspects of our lives and transform them to a state of health and wholeness? I would say the effect would be earth-shaking. Dr. Leonard Lasko has been doing just that for nearly 30 years and is now teaching others to do the same. He says it's possible because unconditional love is at the top of an innate hierarchy of energies. You didn't wake up one day and decide, I'm going to begin healing with love. You were in a standard medical practice as an OBGYN, and something happened along the way that made an abrupt change in your plans for your medical future, and I'd like you to just start right there.
Sure. Yes, I was in a very busy practice in San Francisco, and I was also on the faculty at UCSF. I was attending a 2-week retreat. And during the course of the retreat, I was meditating one evening. It was the middle of the night, and it was dark in the room that I was meditating, and there was no one else in the room. And suddenly it felt like, oh, somebody just walked in and turned on the lights. So I opened my eyes, and the room was still dark, and it was empty. I closed my eyes, and again, there was this inner luminosity, and then suddenly I felt a presence, and I heard inside my head a voice. And this voice, I say a voice, but it was awesome in its presentation. And it said, your work is to heal with love. And tears started to roll down my cheeks. Hair stood up in the back of my head. And I said, oh, so I'm worthy. And this voice said, you are no more or less worthy than anyone else. Your work is to heal with love.
Well, that's grounding.
It was so profound.
Yeah.
When I said, oh, I'm worthy, that was the little egoic me coming in saying, oh, am I good enough for this?
Right.
This presence would have nothing to do with ego.
Yeah.
It was so clear. But it was so profound that I couldn't speak of this for years, you know, because it was so sacred. And at the time, I didn't fully know what it meant. Because
was it somewhat disconcerting to you in that you didn't know what it meant, and yet you felt this deep emotional response and truth in it?
Yeah. Well, it was such a gift of grace. But I didn't feel, in the moment, I didn't feel pressure to go out and do something. I just knew that if I received this grace, then everything else would unfold gracefully.
Yes, yes.
And in fact, that's ultimately what happened.
Let's talk about what happened from that point forward then, when you really did start to look at, how do I go about this healing with love now? And there were probably some stops before you even got into your first experiments and bringing in the labs and Petri dishes and all this.
Sure. Well, initially what happened again was grace. There was I went to another retreat about 9 months later, and there was a fellow who had metastatic cancer. He was a composer of children's songs. And he was my roommate. And he had 10 baseball-sized lesions in one lung and 7 in another. One kidney was completely obstructed with cancer. Another was 50% functional. In the middle of the first night, he woke up, and he was in pain, and he was having trouble breathing because of the metastases. So I went over and I said, can I help? And he said, anything, doc, anything. And I sat down on his bed, and I just spontaneously visualized above my head this radiant sun, like a radiant light, and a beam of light coming down through the top of my head into my heart, overflowing out my shoulders, down my arms. And I just spontaneously, again, this is where grace came in and guidance, I just put my hands on both sides of his chest and recreated this radiant sun without any other intentionality. And after a few moments, he started breathing more easily. He said, oh, thanks, doc, the pain is gone. And then he went to sleep that night and slept well. In the morning, he wakes up and he says, doc, you're really a healer. And I remembered healing with love. Something happened that night that I couldn't understand. It was not in my textbook of medicine. If you look up the index of the textbook of medicine, you don't find the word love. And yet, something very profound happened. And he did well for the next few days. And then he left to go back to Harvard to receive some chemotherapy. And I hugged him. We said goodbye. I thought, no, I don't know that I'd ever see him again. But that started this whole process. Something had happened. Anyway, just to make the story short, 10 years later, I was at a conference. Here's a fellow singing children's songs. And I said, could it possibly be him? And I went over to him and I said, do you remember me? And he said, Doc, you pulled me through that night when I was going under. And we hugged. There were some tears. And he told me what had happened when he went back to Harvard. And he was receiving chemotherapy, and he felt it was destroying the remaining quality of life for him. So he decided, and I'm not encouraging this, of course, by any means, but he pulled out the IV. He said, I don't want any more chemotherapy. He said, if I'm going to leave, then so be it. And he put on headphones, started listening to classical music with some guided imagery, and he had an epiphany. He felt an exquisite sense of peace. He knew beyond any cognitive knowing that who he was awareness itself. And it didn't matter what happened to the physical body. And that was 6 weeks after we had worked together. So obviously there's nothing, first of all, there's nothing that I did personally. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't a personal issue. But a radiologist took some x-rays of him a day after that and came running down the hall and said, there must be some mistake. This couldn't be you, because everything was gone.
Amazing.
And it was what we call a spontaneous remission in medicine, which means we don't know what the heck happened, And so he lived for 10 years after that.
What recovered. A fabulous start to healing with love. This brings us to the notion of love, because this is a very misunderstood word. It's a very, very limited, it's a cut and paste word we use for, oh, I love this spaghetti, to something as profound as a body going into spontaneous healing.
Right.
So obviously there's something about this we're not fully grokking, or we don't have the capacity to fully express.
Right.
And I wanted to I lifted this from your book, by the way.
Sure.
It's a part of a sentence that you wrote that it just struck me so deeply, because it rings true for me. Love is the awareness of relatedness and the impulse toward unity.
Yes.
Now, this is what you're talking about in healing. This is what we call unconditional love.
Right.
This is not sentimental.
That's right.
Love.
That's right.
Let's talk about the nature of the kind of love first, so we have a clear working definition of what you're talking about in your book.
Yeah, I think this is really very, very important, because it's a word that it's what you sometimes called a portmanteau word, like a suitcase word. You put everything into it and you just put a label on it and you call it love, Let's make love, whatever it is, But what I mean by it, and that was the part of the definition, is an awakening to oneness at the deepest level. But less than the deepest level, it's an awareness of connectedness. It's an acknowledgement of the unity of everything. But you can feel connected with something that you're eating. You can feel connected with nature. You can feel connected with the divine. So there are different levels. So love is about unconditioned love resolves duality into unity. But conditioned love allows you to relate within the duality, things within the duality relating to each other. So I love a particular food.
Pizza.
Yeah, I love pizza.
There you go.
I love ice cream.
Yeah.
In meaning, I want to merge with it. I want to become one with it. So whenever you're feeling...
Which is indeed what happens, isn't it?
You eat it. So whatever you feel love with, you want to merge with, you want to become one with. And again, you become one with the divine, become one with a person, become one with nature, whatever it is that you want to become one with. So it also is the key to healing, because you want to become one with whatever it is that you want to heal, rather than deny it, resist it, suppress it, project it onto others, become victimized by it, and so on and so forth. If instead you accept it for what it is and then merge with it, become one with it.
I wanted to talk about that
Yeah.
because it seems to be
Sure.
really key in this process,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
whole notion of that and moving into resonance then,
Yeah.
which seems to be everything, really.
Yeah.
Let's talk about how that shows up in a person's life. You already mentioned the things that people tend to do,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is, anger, denial, fear, all of these normal things that set up illness to begin with, is the exact way in which we respond once an illness has made itself known to us, right?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned resonance.
Yes.
Because resonance is a real key to healing. And one of the classic examples of resonance, of course, is with two tuning forks that
Yes.
both have the same frequency, like an A tuning fork. And if you strike one A tuning fork and bring it next to another one, it induces a vibration in the other one. But if it's a C tuning fork and you strike an A tuning fork and you bring it over there, it won't vibrate. So only similars vibrate with one another. So they vibrate. So we can't equate love with resonance per se, because, for example, if you're angry, if you have anger that's unresolved within you, and you walk into a room and there are angry people, you might get angry at them or with them, because it activates through resonance that anger. So resonance by itself is not an example of love. When you are loving, resonance is always present.
Right. It's a component
It's
of
a
the process.
component.
Yes.
It's always a component,
Yes.
as long as there are two. Now, what love is always seeking is unity. So that's what love does. It wants to merge. Once it merges, it in a way even disappears. You can use the word love to describe oneness, because love reminds you of the one. That's the function of love, is for you to remember the oneness, because there's an apparent separation. We live in a world of apparent separation, and love reminds you, it remembers
And
the original, it awakens you to oneness. So it brings back the members that were apparently separate, but never were. See, love doesn't create unity, because unity always is, but it reminds us of that unity, because we've forgotten it.
Yes.
As part of the human condition when we came in, we forgot the oneness. It's part of the play, the dance, the Leela of life itself.
And it seems we're
Movement.
in a time where people en masse are attempting to remember.
That's what's happening.
Yes, this is the time of remembering. And so you've taken it, you started, by the way, we need to mention, this
Yeah.
isn't something you began a few years ago. We're going back 25 years. You were quite a bit ahead of the game
Yeah.
when you began understanding these things and actually applying them. And so now that I think we have a proper working description of what love is,
Right.
let's go into some of the early experiments where you weren't just using a placebo effect, and maybe even explain the difference between a placebo effect and what you were doing with
Sure.
cells,
Sure.
living cells.
Sure. Well, what I noticed, just since we mentioned my practice, was when I started doing some of this work, after all that happened, those miracles were starting to happen when I started exploring in my practice selectively with patients. And I noticed that a lot of the distress that people were feeling, and almost all the suffering, and many illnesses, not all illnesses, but many illnesses, were associated with a perceived sense of separation that people experienced of one part of themselves from another that was too painful to hold in consciousness. You know, they may have had a deep wound early in childhood, very common. Even it didn't have to be a real wound, just the way it was perceived. It could have been, or it could have gone back to the time when they were in their mother's womb, and they pick up the feelings of the mother at a pre-verbal state, and then attribute that to themselves. Somehow, I'm not okay. I'm not good enough.
Unwanted pregnancy.
I'm a
what does
girl,
that do?
and they wanted a boy. I'm not wanted. Sometimes they feel the fear that the mother has about her capability as a mother, if it's a first child, for example, and they feel, how am I going to survive if she feels that way? So I'm not going to say she's inadequate. I'll feel that there's something wrong with me. Now, this is not a cognitive process, but this is what turns out to be one of the experiential roots of a lot of our diseases, illnesses, I should say, rather than diseases, illnesses and most of our suffering. So, and also our sense of separation from others, from our environment, our world, and ultimately our separation from the divine, our true nature. Right. So I started doing this work and was getting some wonderful results in practice. And I said, well, wait a minute. My work is to heal with love, and the world doesn't need another OBGYN. This is my calling now. I've been given this great gift of knowing what my calling is. But how much of what's happening here is a placebo effect? You give somebody a sugar pill, and they respond as if it's medication, and that belief system actually affects the expression of their genes. And there's a new science called epigenetics, which is a reflection of this.
Bruce Lipton's work.
Bruce Lipton's work, wonderful example of that. So I said, I got to show myself that there's something more. I knew that there was something beyond belief, is what I'm really saying. It's not just the belief system. There's something about the interaction of my consciousness, or I could say this consciousness, and the consciousness of whatever it is that I'm focusing on, whether it be something that's organic, alive, or non-organic, such as water even. So I decided to go into the laboratory. I fortunately had a number of friends who were scientists, well-known scientists in the Bay Area, who worked at some major universities in the Bay Area. And I started doing research with them, first working on bacteria, and wanted to see what the impact of focusing on bacteria would be. Would love have an impact in the same way that this, you could say, this love that came through in the form of this radiant sun and the space that was just created and the grace that was just created, could that somehow be transferred to a single-celled organism that was beyond the placebo effect? And in fact, that's what we found. What I did was I started looking at the bacteria under the microscope in a petri dish, and just to get a sense of what they looked like. And this was the salmonella that causes dysentery in humans. And I looked at it, and suddenly I had this epiphany. Oh, you have as much right to exist as I do, because we were created by the same source, the same creator. It's just my human perspective that says there's something wrong with you. You know, we'll put a name on you, we'll give you a label, we'll call it a pathogen. Later on, we call it cancer, you know, but it exists. It was created by the same source.
And it's struggling for its own survival.
It's struggling. Whatever exists wants to persist.
Right.
You know, it was just my human perspective. And something happened when that occurred. There was a total acceptance of its existence, an unconditioned acceptance. And my awareness began to vibrate at the same frequency as it without any distorted filters or conditioning. See?
So I wanted to ask you about that.
We came into resonance.
Right. That's where I started really perking up on reading your book on this notion of resonance. But How was it that you were able to determine within your own being that you had reached that resonance field with that bacteria or cancer cell?
That's a wonderful question. But there was just there was a oneness, I would say.
You felt this?
Yeah, there was just space.
Yes.
There was just oneness.
Yes.
Is what it was.
Where it didn't feel as though it was
I shifted
any
into
longer
a
separate from you.
It was a non-ordinary state.
Yeah.
We became one.
Yes.
In those moments. We became one. And then what I learned was, if I introduce an intention in that field of oneness. Now this is a deeper state of resonance called coherence.
Right.
Where not only are we vibrating together, but there's also, we come into what's called phase together. It's a stronger form of resonance that's characteristic of lasers, for example. And when you come into that stronger form of resonance called coherence, the energy is squared, which is why lasers are sometimes used to burn holes through steel and shoot down missiles and so on and so forth. So in effect, I became a human laser in that moment. Now it's not just me that's capable of this. This is our birthright. We're all capable of coming into resonance, coming into oneness, essentially, because oneness is our underlying essential nature. The oneness of that bacteria and my consciousness at that level were the same. And then I introduced an intention. I unconditionally accepted the presence of this bacteria. Now when you feel unconditionally accepted, as you are, totally, 100%, what you would feel is love.
Right.
So unconditional acceptance is another way of talking about love. So this, you see, the bacteria in that laboratory, very interestingly, a lot of people in the lab were looking at ways of destroying it, killing it, the same way that they do with cancer cells. And those cancer cells and that bacteria, they resist that. But when they're loved, they're totally accepted for what they are, they release their resistance and they're more open. And when I worked with that bacteria, I wasn't trying to kill it anymore, because I just acknowledged its existence. That's all I wanted to do, was reduce its growth rate. That's all. Now, in the body, if you reduce the growth rate of a bacteria or cancer cells and so on, then the immune system, with the killer cells, the T cells and so on, can take over and can bring that into balance and harmony and control the disease. You don't have to destroy it, per se. So that's what I found, was that I could reduce the growth rate of the bacteria by 50% relative to controls.
Which was, I was reading that in the book. I thought, this is, you're one of, a lot of people talk about love heals. However, you went in the lab to really prove it before you even got going. And there's a part of this you're talking about that I want to get a little bit more into for just a moment.
Sure.
You've gone into resonance and full acceptance and coherence.
Yeah.
With the cells.
Yeah.
What is it in the consciousness of the cells that will then say, okay, I'm open to your intention? What happens there that you can see? It can be mystical. It doesn't matter where you're coming from on this.
Yeah.
We have pretty sophisticated viewers watching right now.
Right.
What is that thing that happens that allows those single cells to be open to your intention, which might be going in a diametrically opposed direction to where they were headed in their own growth patterns?
That's a wonderful question. You see, these are single cells.
Yeah.
And in a sense, they've been isolated. And they recognize your consciousness, my consciousness, this consciousness, coming from a collective that's in touch with, aware of unity, oneness, which is what it ultimately wants to evolve to. From that separate sense of itself, a separate cell. You know, our bodies are composed of 50 to 100 trillion cells, but they're not separate. They're in this organism, and this organism is part of a collective of humanity, and humanity is part of a collective of the universe and universes and so on. And but by virtue of the fact that I'm coming from a place of aware unity, there's a dominion. If we use that word, a dominion over the consciousness of the single cell. In the same way that you can work with entities that are disincarnate, that they use the word exorcisms in certain religious circles and so on. But you have dominion over whatever feels separate because they're living an illusion. They're living in a trance. So when you come from this sense of wholeness, there is a natural dominion that listens to that direction, that evolution that it wants to inherently move toward. And so that cell inherently wanted to move toward that unity and will accept that guidance to reduce its direction. Yeah, so that's what happened. And then I did the work, of course, with cancer cells. And there I was exploring different intentions to see, first of all, if you just casually talk to a cell in that state, that loving state, it's one thing. But if you actually have a stronger intention has both energy and information in it. And the energy part of it is the desire part, the feeling. So if the more energy you put into the intention, which is with feeling, the more powerful the impact of that intention. If it's not just a thought, but also a feeling.
You define it as a persistent, focused desire, which feels absolutely correct.
Right.
Desire, people get confused about the word desire as well.
That's right, that's right. Yeah, well, a desire is a movement towards something or a movement away from something. It's a movement. All desire is about movement toward the object of your desire or away from something. You move toward or away from. But it's a movement, and that movement is energy.
Yes.
And so you're moving toward a particular goal with an intention. So I decided to explore different kinds of intention. And I won't go into details. Some of the intentions that I explored were let God's will flow through these hands. Yeah, but
I love that. I love those experiments. I like the stats. I like the outcome.
Okay.
If you want to share what the intention was and what the actual outcome was, because I found it interesting.
Okay, well, the most powerful intention that I found with working with the cancer cells was return to the natural order, harmony, growth rate of your pre-hyperactive cell line. In other words, give them real direction of the way to go.
Very clear and specific.
Yeah, of your pre-hyperactive cell line. I initially used the word pre-cancer, but then I said, let's not use that label.
Yeah.
They were just more active, and return to that natural order, harmony. So that was the most powerful of the intentions. Then I wanted to explore what's the relationship between a thought form intention, such as what I gave you, and an image. So if I held an image of what I wanted as an end result, what was the result of that? When I just did the thought form, I got a 20% inhibition of growth rate relative to contemporaneous controls measured by the uptake of radioactive thymidine in the DNA of these growing cancer cells. We used a scintillation counter and so on. Very sophisticated analysis here. But what we found was a 20% reduction. Now, if we added imagery to that thought form, we doubled it.
That's an astounding.
Yeah, so thought plus imagery.
40+%?
40%.
Wow.
And then we found, and this was what made it very elegant, is if I used imagery with the reverse intent to stimulate the growth of these cancer cells, we found that we could do that as well. So we could inhibit or stimulate. We stimulated the growth rate by 15% relative to contemporaneous controls. And that's when I knew that love had a real impact. love plus intention had a real impact on the growth of cancer cells and bacteria. And I subsequently did research with DNA and even water. Even water, we were able to change the optical density of water, actually changing the angle between the oxygen and the two hydrogen ions in such a way that it was reflected in some of the devices that we use to measure it. And also it changed the acidity of the water, the solubility, and the surface tension. So, we're not just talking about love as, something that's the stuff of poets and mystics here. This is something that was a real impact on living and non-living systems. And that's when I decided to leave my practice and say, okay, and of course colleagues were saying, you're selling one of the best practices in San Francisco to do what?
I'm sure they did.
But this is what I had that calling. Your work was to heal with real love, and then I wrote the book called Healing with Love. And it wasn't that easy because the editors at Harper said, no, you can't use that title. It's too new agey. Nobody's going to healing with love. I said, it has to be that. And, I kept insisting. And finally I said, okay, we're going to give in to this guy and let him do it. So that's why the book is called Healing with Love.
And in this book, it is chock-a-block with information. It's chock-a-block with the protocols, the actual protocols that you developed over a period of time, so that it's quite accessible to the person reading it, to be able to start integrating these practices into their own lives for their own self-healing, or to use in the healing of others as well.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's okay on camera to say healing, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, exactly. Well, what I did was I developed these protocols. I called the work holo-energetics.
Yes.
Healing with the energy of the whole that's greater than the sum of the parts. Because what I mentioned, a lot of illness was associated with the illusion and the sense of separation of one part of ourselves from another, ourselves from others, and from our connection with our essential nature. And so, if separation is an apparency, an illusion, and you're maintaining this separation, it must take energy. In fact, it takes an enormous amount of energy to maintain the illusion of separation. It takes an enormous amount of energy to keep those wounds suppressed, buried, disowned, and even to project it onto others, in the form of victim and so on and so forth. So I thought, well, if we could release this energy of separation by bringing people back into wholeness, into an awareness of their essential nature, all this energy would be available for healing, because healing occurs naturally in the body. The body knows how to heal. And if you can release the energy of separation through love, bringing that which appears to be separate back into unity, into wholeness, this energy of love is released and facilitates the healing process. It actually profoundly facilitates the healing process. So, in other words, there are times when just that release through love is sufficient for healing. Yeah. Literal physical healing, emotional healing, mental healing. Just that release of energy is enough. In spiritual healing, in other words, love is not necessary for healing. Because the body knows how to heal. People could be angry and full of hate, and they'll still heal. But love by itself is sufficient to stimulate the healing process. That's what I learned. And then in spiritual healing, in the deeper holoenergetic healing work, love is both necessary and sufficient. In spiritual healing, love is necessary and sufficient. Both.
Now, when we talk about going through these various processes of healing, one of the areas that, well, there's one little story that you tell in there about unconditional love being more than sufficient in this case. And it's a fun story because it has to do with a professional basketball player.
Oh, yeah,
That one,
yeah,
the
Sleepy
Golden State
Floyd.
Sleepy Floyd.
That's
I love
right.
that story. Can you talk about that? Just because I think everybody watching this can really feel this.
Right. Now, he was on the professional basketball team, the
Golden State Warriors.
Golden State Warriors, and they were behind, and they were playing in the championship, and somebody put up a sign that said, "Sleepy, we love you. Win or lose, we love you." And he saw that sign, and something happened within him. And he said it didn't matter, since it was win or lose, we love you, it didn't matter what happened. And he suddenly went on to set a record. They won the game, the championship, and he set a record for the most points scored in a
quarter. What, 29 points in a quarter?
Yeah, 29 points in a
amazing.
quarter. And he said something shifted for him when he saw that. And he felt unconditionally loved.
Yes.
And that put him, again, into not only an altered state, but at one with Source. And he couldn't miss. It's no matter what he did, because it wasn't him as a personality, it wasn't him as an ego, it was him simply at one with Source.
Yes.
So no matter
in that
what he did,
state of unity.
he was in a total state of unity, so that whatever was wanted happened.
Yes.
That's the manifestation, and that actually is the way healing works. When you enter into that state of unity through love, then whatever is wanted, whatever is for the highest good, happens. In this case, the highest good was for him to score those 29 points and manifest unconditioned love.
Yes.
In action.
And it is
In
interesting
action.
for that being the macro type of a scenario to the micro scenario.
Exactly.
What if every cell in our body felt that love?
Exactly. Exactly. And so I've developed some processes. One I call the tracing process, the holoenergetic tracing process, where you actually go back to the experiential root of an issue, maybe even in your mother's womb or very early in childhood, and deeply experience that. And then what it is that started you into that separative process. Experience where you separated out. It could have been an actual event that happened. It could have been a misperception or an interpretation that became crystallized as a belief.
And so much of it really is a perception issue.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah, I remember when I was in Sri Lanka, I went to an elephant farm. And these elephants were moving big logs. And there was one huge male elephant that was often on the side there. And they said, "Don't go near him. You know, he's a tough character." And we looked over and we saw that he had a chain around his leg, and it was tied to a little tree. I mean, and they're used to carrying these huge logs. I said, "He's tied to this little tree." He said, "Well, yeah, he's been tied to that tree since he was young, and if we tied him to one of those big trees, he'd pull it out by the roots. But as long as he's tied to that little tree, he believes that he can't. He doesn't have the strength to do that." And I looked. That's the power of belief.
Yes.
And that's what we do in our lives. You see, we have these unconscious early issues and beliefs, and that keep us limited at that level. So I developed this tracing process, which allows us to go back to those experiential roots and pull them up by the root, and then replace them with what we really, really wanted to feel and believe at that time. It's actually, when we say we wanted to feel, it turns out that it's what our soul really wants to feel as it expresses itself in this body, in this form, in this lifetime. What does it want to feel? And each of us has a unique combination of about 5 to 6 to 7 feelings that we want to explore and express and experience this lifetime, like our own soul fingerprint, which comes up in the course of this tracing process.
That's
and
a
it's
beautiful way to
done,
put it.
yeah, and it's done in a field of coherent love. That's the secret. that makes it work. It has to be done in a coherent field of love. So the practitioner, the most important quality of the practitioner is to be able to develop this field of coherent love. And then I also found I developed another process, the holoenergetic forgiveness process, which is extraordinarily powerful because you need to forgive. It seems like you're forgiving the other for what they did or didn't do. But it's really an internal process, and it has nothing to do with the other person because everything that's going on is taking place right now, right here, within you. So it's all really about you. And the most important person to forgive actually is you. But you as the little one inside yourself, you as the adolescent teenager, and you as the adult for the things you did or didn't do that were not loving, things that you felt ashamed of, things that you felt guilty, because that's what's separating you from your essential nature. These are some of the veils. And then the deeper veils are when you start to realize you're identifying who you are with your mind-made self, with the little me that has thoughts that come that are not even your thoughts, feelings that are not even your feelings, and then they may be yours, but they come and they go, and you say, I'm the story, this whole story, and I'm the beliefs that I have that are conscious or unconscious. I'm the judgments that I have about myself and other people. So when you can see that and transcend it, then the inner light of your true nature can shine forth, start to dissolve these veils that separate us from our essential nature. So these processes really allow that to happen. But again, the key is that the practitioner who does this be in a state of coherent love. So that's the key to
and
this
you
whole
really,
process.
you're very, very good in this book at very clearly articulating the pathways into these states and also tools to be able to develop this if it's not something that you've already experienced and doesn't come easily. The book really is full of step by step, every tool, right down into some of the tools that you say are in the book are very helpful, if not necessary, and that is going into the work of breathing, for example, using breathing even in the development of intuition. You also talk about the 4 R's, and I think we don't need to go into them right now, do we? Or
no,
do you
no,
want,
no,
yeah,
no,
we
no,
don't need to, because that's part of that recognition, resonance, release, and reformation during the healing process, and that's really, I think people can say, we can save that for the book. But let's talk a little bit about the breathing, the breath in the process.
Yeah, well, breath is really another way of looking at spirit. That's why the word inspiration, taking in spirit, when you breathe in, and expiration, you're breathing out spirit. When you're breathing in, breathing out. And what I started to do, some research at UC Davis, seeing what happens if I breathe in through one nostril and out through another. There was an ancient technique where you close one nostril and breathe in through the alternate nostril.
I use that, it's profound.
And then breathe out through the other nostril. And what I found when I hooked myself up to an electrocardiogram, worked with a professor of physiology at the university there, medical physiology, because it seemed to me that if I was picking up my hand, I was activating the contralateral hemisphere. That's not a good way to do this if we want to create balance in both hemispheres. So I thought, well, let's just imagine the breath coming in and leaving, and coming in and leaving
so don't touch your nostrils then in the process of this alternate breathing.
Yeah, imagine it and feel the hairs, feel the cool air coming in, and then feel it coming out a little warmer and such. And if you just imagine it, and I have these pictures, graphs in the book, of both hemispheres coming into a beautiful state of balance. And when that happens, a phenomenon appears called the blue pearl, which is described in some of the Eastern literature, when both hemispheres come into balance. And so you can bring both hemispheres into balance in a beautiful way through breathing alone. And you can also bring both hemispheres into balance by breathing in and out through your heart. Now you can breathe in and out through the alternate nostrils, and then you can imagine simultaneously breathing in through both nostrils, bringing your breath up to the center of your forehead here and releasing your breath through the center of your forehead, and that opens up your intuitive senses in a very elegant and powerful way. You can also bring your breath up through both nostrils to the center of your forehead and release your breath into the space in the back of your head. There's an area called the third ventricle here, but you just imagine it also has space in it, and you breathe into that space, and that opens you to a different form of intuitive guidance as well. And then you can release your breath into the top of your head, the crown, and that opens you directly to divine connection. And then you can also release your breath into your heart space. There's a beautiful space in the back of your heart. You're not aware of it normally, but if you imagine that there's a space in the back of your heart and you breathe through the center of your chest into that space and bring your awareness to that space in the back of your heart, and then start to look at everything from the space in the back of your heart, from the space in the back of your heart. So that the space becomes the context and everything else is in the foreground. That's the background and everything is in the foreground. Everything looks different.
And you become an observer of a different type.
You become the observer, the
Yes.
witness in a different way. You become the aware witness from that space in the back of your heart.
Now, how do you apply
And
this?
you can listen to music that way.
Yes.
You can do healing that way. You can enter into relationship from the space in the back of your heart.
I can feel that as we're talking.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. If you close your eyes and then you open them, you tune into that space in the back of your heart. You bring your awareness into that space, and then you open your eyes and you start to look at an object from that space.
It's like you go into instant resonance.
Instant resonance,
Yeah.
because it's a portal to oneness, to your essential nature, to presence, all these terms that represent unity, awareness, essentially. And it's so easy to do.
Yes.
This is what I have developed and I teach in my seminars and workshops now, which I'm giving around the world and
Yeah,
and
you've
such.
progressed this work. Let's talk about that, because
Mm-hmm.
I highly recommend everybody just go to your site, pick up a copy of the book so you can
Right.
be guided through all of this, because we would be talking for days
Right.
to cover everything in this book and all of the tools that you're offering us. So let's talk about where you're going with it now.
Yeah, well, I realize that we're here for a short period of time, even if it's 100 years, or if they extend our life here on Earth for 150 years. It's a short time. We're essentially born to live, but we're also born to die. But is there a part of us that's immortal, that was never born and never dies, that just passes through this body? This loving awareness is what we might talk about, this loving awareness. And so I decided that the progression of my work is to really heal into wholeness through love, through that awareness of unity. And it's interesting, because there are a number of paths to wholeness. One of the paths is through love, another is through truth. So, and then there's a path of so-called action, just doing good deeds, service.
Yes.
Doing good deeds, the yogic path, so to speak. But I realized as I was starting to explore this that, I know that love seeks unity. And in the same way, knowing seeks truth. I mean, what we want, what we're interested in when we look at knowing is we're not interested in knowing falsehood, because falsehood doesn't exist.
Right.
We're only interested in knowing truth. So if loving seeks truth, it's searching, it's seeking, it's desiring. As we mentioned before, desiring involves movement. There's a movement toward unity. There's an impulse to merge subject-object into one, so that there's no longer subject, there's no longer object, there's only one. That's what love does.
No better immune system booster, that's for sure.
But once love finds the unity that it seeks, all movement toward unity stops, and what's left is stillness. Just that stillness. And the same thing with knowing. Knowing is seeking truth. And when it finds that truth, it moves toward that truth, all seeking the truth stops. And there's only that same stillness. That's why Jesus said, you know, truth will set you free. Even if it's the truth that you have cancer or that you're going to die in a minute, it's the most amazing thing. When you finally accept instead of resist the truth, you're free. And another word for that stillness is peace.
I was just going to
Another
say
word
that.
for that
Yes.
stillness is joy. It's that stillness is beyond quality. It's beyond description or words. And yet, when we want to describe it as an experience, when we have an experience of that which is beyond experience, we use these words: the freedom, peace, joy, oneness, love. You know, we're all using all these words to describe that which is beyond description. But the fact is, they all lead to the one.
Yes.
Truth, and at the highest level, truth and love are one. You know, so we have different ways, and it's not an exclusive path. People have, you know, they combine truth and love and service. And everyone has their unique way of experiencing, expressing that oneness.
Well, you certainly have your unique way of doing it, and are doing some profound good on the planet. And again, we'll put everybody in touch with your work so they can find out, because you're doing quite a few lectures and workshops now, and with the new work that you've progressed into. And I have to say, just sitting here with you, it's almost hard to be engaged in a conversation with you, because you have this profound energy that automatically moves me into resonance with you, to where it's almost a hypnotic state, a very expansive hypnotic state. It's like I could just sit here and stare at you the entire time and not say a word.
Sure, it's oneness.
Yeah,
it's oneness.
Yes, you have very, very, very lovely energies.
Yeah.
Yes, you've obviously, that's why that night when they said, whether you're any more important or not, or worthy than the rest, you certainly had the capability of opening profoundly into this understanding of resonance and beyond, into love and unity. So I see why you're the one that tapped on the shoulder and said, you will be healing with love.
Yeah.
So with that said, we'll turn everybody onto your work here, and thank you so much for the time. I just really enjoyed sitting with you.
Well, it was the same. It was like sitting with oneself.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Lasko's book, Healing with Love, is available through Amazon and other booksellers. It details how each one of us can tap into this field of resonance and love for healing our own lives and bodies and those of others. Until next time, thanks for watching CMN.